Alright, let's do this one last time. My name is Schizo, and for the last few months, I've been making my very own costume of Spider-Man, with web shooters that actually function, firing the real-life equivalent of Peter Parker's web shooter. And why would I spend such an ungodly amount of time, effort, and money on this? Well, it's like my uncle taught me. With great creativity comes great financial irresponsibility. Now, just because you've seen the costume right at the start of the video, don't go thinking you know all the little details and secrets this suit has to offer. So stick around and find out how my Spider-Man suit and web shooters came to be. I can already hear some of you refuting the title of this video. I pulled you into this with the claim that I've made an accurate Spider-Man suit. I can anticipate the criticisms with regards to that claim a lot of people may have, and you are more than welcome to throw them at me. But no matter how much you might even completely hate what I've made here, just know that none of you could possibly criticize this costume as harshly as I do. Going all the way back to the beginning, I knew I wanted to make a comic-accurate Spidey suit. But that desire begs the question, what does it mean for a design to be accurate? And more particularly for a redesign to be comic-accurate? It becomes even trickier to assess when we're talking about translating a two-dimensional page into the real world. You all know what Spider-Man's costume looks like. A figure of a man covered head to toe in spandex. There aren't any facial features beyond the outline displayed, only a pair of blank white eyes bordered by black outlines. Sections of red are broken by a contrasting blue that highlights the anatomy of the character. Limited to the aforementioned red sections runs a pattern of webs that draws your attention in, and also ties the spider motif of the character to a costume design that would visually resemble almost no aspect of it without. It's visually striking, it's unique, instantly recognizable from any angle, it's iconic, and so much of Spider-Man's popularity can probably be credited to the design alone. It's not some multi-billion-dollar suit of armor, most of the time, nor is it a super-powered transformation that gives enhancement. Most of the time. It's a spandex bodysuit that, given enough learned skill, pretty much anyone could probably make. And more importantly, unlike most other superheroes, it shows no skin. That particular detail, even if not originally intentional, is the physical embodiment of why this character has been so popular for over 60 years.
You know one of the greatest things about Spider-Man's outfit, his costume?
What?
He is completely covered. So any kid could imagine he's Spider-Man because no color of the skin shows. He could be black under that, he could be red, he could be yellow, he could belong to any race. And that wasn't done purposely, it was done accidentally, but I think it was the best thing we did, making him so that he could be anybody under that costume.
In my opinion, it's one of the most perfect designs in fiction ever made, and unlike many old characters where the goofiness has to be toned down or otherwise updated with the times, Spider-Man's design is timeless, and they literally got it pretty much perfect on the first attempt. For both new and old viewers, I normally focus more on science and the process of making things, rather than passionately discussing its background, so I apologize for the out-of-the-blue nerd essay. But the more I went through the process, the more appreciation I gained for a character that I already had so much for. Spider-Man has always been my close second favorite superhero, but now? He's a somewhat closer second, I guess. Going back to our train of thought on comic accuracy, there have been a lot of comics and a lot of places to draw reference from. Notice how the three live-action classic suits look notably different in style from each other, and you still get people arguing over which one captures the essence of Spider-Man the best. Now, for me, I don't think the merit of a costume is strictly limited to how close it is to being a visual one-to-one copy of the original. I think it's more important how well it fits that particular version of the character and their story, as well as how it invokes the image of the source material. One of my major sources of reference for this suit was the earliest comic runs of Spider-Man, where I took lots of details that if you're a more casual fan, you might not even know about Spider-Man's costume. For instance, Spidey's comic book outfit is not a onesie like most of the movies, it's actually split into 7 different pieces, an aspect which I already tackled with my last suit. So to add on to that, I wanted to feature some of the gadgets that Spider-Man had featured in those original runs, such as his utility belt under his costume that stores his web cartridges, a compact camera, and his spider signal. The early runs also featured webs under the armpits that kinda just slowly faded as time went on, although modern adaptations have more recently begun paying homage to that, so I wanted to bring them back. Although, I did want mine to be removable since, to be honest, I'm not really sure if I prefer the suit with or without them. Comment down below what you think. Do you think the default Spidey suit should or shouldn't have web wings under the arms? Anyways, aside from aspects that you may or may not think are goofy or outdated, it actually makes a lot of sense for Spider-Man's outfit to be split into separate pieces, especially considering lots of iteration shows that he wears it under his regular clothes. The movies usually use practical costumes that are one piece, and the reason they do that is pretty simple. It just looks a lot cleaner. In real life, there would be a pretty noticeable overlap of the pieces, such as the shirt over the pants. In the comics, Peter hides his web shooters under the sleeves, and along with his utility belt under the costume, those would create pretty noticeable bulges. Now, comics can easily just hand-wave the logic away, but in real life it's just not that straightforward. Now, even though this is a point of concern, is it really even a problem? I mean, let's take a look at some other comic book works that incorporate a little more realism into their art, from artists such as Alex Ross or Lee Bermejo. Now, this kind of art takes some of the logical flaws that you would find with Spidey's costume in the real world, and instead of just ignoring it like most comics would, it actually just kind of rolls with it. For instance, one obvious thing I didn't mention is how in real life you would probably see Spider-Man's lips and his ears through the mask. Well, Alex Ross draws those outlines and it still looks great. The other artist I mentioned, Lee Bermejo, often draws the profile of his web shooters underneath his sleeves, and more often actually just leaves them on the outside. He also makes heavy use of the 7-piece idea in his art. I mean, look at this. Outside of the awesome standout aspects like the jagged spider logo, the messy web pattern, and more menacing than usual eyes, see how there's wrinkles everywhere? And oh, one of my favorite details, look at how the gloves don't quite line up properly with the shirt. Also cool how his drawings just use regular shoe soles on Spidey's boots. Unlike most of the movies, I can almost believe that broke teenage Peter Parker made this. So with my suit, I want to embrace something that art like this seems to get, and the films seem to miss when it comes to his costume. You can make it realistic without changing too much. It can look homemade and still look cool. And while I want to make something that looks like it leapt straight off a comic book page, I also want it to look just a little real. Now, I want to give a huge shout out to fellow Spidey cosplayer Sensational. He makes some really beautiful Spidey costumes, and he also models and sells some awesome face shells as well. You may recall that last time I used his pattern to make my last suit, and this time I'm borrowing his methods again and adding my own varying elements, but the entire foundation of my new costume is still based on his work. If you really want to learn how to make your own Spider-Man costume like this, you should definitely go follow him and go look at his Patreon tutorials. They're really helpful. I also want to give a huge shout out to more or less the entire Spider-Man cosplay community, since I've been studying their methods trying to figure out how to make my own costume. Anyways, I don't want to get too detailed with methods that aren't my own, but the general flow of it is that we start with a blank pattern base which we paint our suit pattern onto. Then we bring that pattern base into a dimensionally accurate Blender model. This is so that we can make sure we like the way everything looks and that the web lines all match up on the seams and whatnot. Then we have to somehow translate our pattern onto physical fabric before sewing it all together. As for the materials on my costume, I jumped to the obvious. Spandex. Red and blue spandex, of course. I also wanted to add unique textures to my spandex since it would help my suit stand out from the rest on its own. Now, how do we add texture to this plain-looking spandex? Well, the industry standard is through a process called screen printing, the thing they use to put graphics on t-shirts. And there's a special variation of the process that uses high-density inks to create raised textures, which I'm very fond of. I didn't use this process because it's expensive as hell to start, would require dedicated space that I don't have, and has a relatively high learning curve. And while textured screen-printed fabrics are out there for sale, they're also pretty expensive, and that would remove a lot of control over certain things like the orientation of the printed pattern, which I wanted to keep. Since all the current existing methods of creating texture were taken off the table for me, I decided to make a new one. I spent months refining my own procedure to create raised, detailed patterns on my fabric using puff paint. Call it puff printing, poor man's screen printing, faux screen printing, whatever you want. But the gist of it is that I take laser cut stencils that I design, spray them down with adhesive, place them on the fabric, and then puff paint through them. This was actually based on what other cosplayers have done to create texture without screen printing using perforated adhesive vinyl for a dot texture, which is what I was originally planning on doing before I realized I could do this. By the way, some people actually spend months puff painting the texture by hand, which I gotta say, if you're one of those people, respect to you, I don't know how you do it. Now, I want to tell you guys that this method is very much specialized for me. That is to say, it's not practical, or even cost-effective, like, at all. My dog barked, sorry. And I bring this up because... I bring this up because I know a lot of you are going to see this video and think, wow, that's so cool and smart. This guy is amazing. I should definitely subscribe to him and watch all of his videos. No. Well, okay, that second half, yes, please go ahead and do that. But as for the first half, that's because as expensive as screen printing is, the industrial laser I'm using to achieve this is significantly more costly. Additionally, this method also involves a good amount of skill and failure, and with the amount of time it takes to make these stencils, it's really not even practical for me to sell them like this. And I mean, technically you could wash them and make them reusable, but most of the time I just don't find it worth the effort. What I've done is create a method that's really only suitable for me specifically, or at the very least someone who owns an industrial laser that has a vacuum flatbed. I mean, you could use a smaller scale machine or a Cricut, and I've even seen people try to 3D print stencils, but it'll honestly take forever. Anyways, moving on, fabric choice and personalization was a highly important step to me, as this was going to be the first thing that made my suit unique and stand out. I tried out several different textures using different sources of inspiration by stenciling vector patterns, by the way, a lot of which I got from this guy, and I also experimented with lots of different paint mix variation utilizing not only puff paint, but also liquid latex, regular acrylic paints, and acrylic mediums. Originally, I was going to use bricks for the blue patterns, but then I realized that I had the choice to use whatever texture I wanted within geometric constraints of stencils. Was I really going to use it for a pattern that 2 out of the 3 live-action Spideys primarily use? So, I went back and chose this one instead. I know a small minority of people don't like the blue material to be shiny like the No Way Home Final Swingsuit, but personally, I think it's kind of a clever way to mimic how he's shaded in the comics. But maybe that's just me. Anyways, getting into more specifics, I use Mylar sheets to create my stencils, and I spent a long time finding the ideal speed and power level to cleanly cut through my material. Then I pinned down my fabric to a cork board with thumbtacks and create my paint mixture before spreading it as evenly as possible over the piece. Finally, before the piece dries, I very carefully remove the stencil, which is by far the most stressful part, especially with larger pieces such as the pants. Which reminds me, the pants actually raised another issue. See, I didn't have a cork board large enough to pin the pants to, and one that would be large enough is actually kinda pricey. Luckily, at exactly the same time, I conveniently found 3 very large cork boards being thrown away in the trash. Since I no longer had to worry about that, I went ahead and made my pant pieces. The stretch on the blue sections of fabric is more severely limited, but luckily the base pattern I have for this suit is more form-fitting and doesn't require a whole lot of stretch to work compared to some others out there.
The most nerve-wracking part of this process is peeling the stencils off after you've painted them. And this will never not be terrifying, because if you don't do it at the right speed and I guess at the right angle, some of your pattern is going to kind of bunch together and then you've ruined your whole piece. And it gets especially difficult with larger pieces such as the pants. So if I messed up one of these, I might crash out. First piece. And the first one looks good. Oh, thank God. Ah, damn it. Okay, you know what? It's not Not a big deal. Not a big deal. Okay, that's good. I'm really questioning my decision to do all the pant parts at once. God, no. That one's good. That one is also good.
Later.
You know, I really love making stuff for my videos, but oftentimes it puts me in a seated or hunched over position for hours, which really just isn't good for me. Especially my back. My back.
Thankfully, I got something that helped me with that issue from today's video sponsor, FlexiSpot, in the form of their E7 Plus standing desk. So I actually recently got a new room while making this video, and in very Peter Parker fashion, I wanted to fabricate my suit in it. So I needed some working tables, and FlexiSpot gave me better than I could have hoped for. This is definitely the coolest desk I've ever owned, and beneficial as well. Take it from someone who spent a great deal of his life doing work behind a computer or with paper and a pencil sitting down, even as a 22-year-old, I can tell you with confidence that it catches up with us all eventually. With a standing desk like the E7 Pro, I can constantly switch positions at my own leisure while being productive. And so could you, as the desk is adjustable to accommodate a wide range of heights. Not to mention taste as well, since the FlexiSpot standing desks are customizable to include a variety of different materials and finishes. And you might think that a standing desk utilizing moving parts would be unstable or incapable of supporting significant weight, however that would be incorrect, as this E7 series desk has a bolted frame with 4 legs, making it much more stable than other wobbly 2-legged standing desks. It can move with a weight capacity of 440 pounds, and while stationary can support up to 540 pounds. Be sure to check out FlexiSpot's website in the description below to get your own E7 desk. Or maybe one of their other accessories, as they offer a wide range of other products, from ergonomic chairs to all sorts of office appliances. Not to mention that they offer special discounts to military, students, doctors, and more. You can also use my code for an additional $50 off. I really enjoy this desk, it's functional, aesthetically pleasing, and high quality, so I'd really recommend it to anyone looking to upgrade their workspace.
Okay, now that I've made my work life more comfortable, and I've also finished all the textures on my fabrics, I should probably figure out how I'm going to go about making the iconic black webline pattern on my costume. What was that?
No. No! No!
Misery, 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 that's what you've chosen.
So, puff paint. I've obviously been using it to make the textures on my fabrics, but typically in the context of Spider-Man cosplay, it's most often used to make 3-dimensional webbing. And look, I know that some people don't like the raised webbing, but I think it's kind of cool. Maybe not too raised like Maguire's, maybe a little more subtly raised like Andrew Garfield. And for reasons I already displayed on the screen, I really tried to avoid puff paint. It's probably my least favorite part of making a Spider-Man costume. I considered several methods, from laser cutting webbing to making molds for polyurethane webs and gluing those on, but after thinking about the effort and the end result, nothing was really worth it over the tried and true method of just using a bottle of puff paint.
I mixed my puff paint mixture with different variations of black and liquid latex for added durability in my preferred color. Then I transfer it to a cake icing bag, which reduces the air bubble factor that comes with bottles and is easier on my hands. Now, my preferred approach for puff paint is to paint every individual row of webs one by one. It's a process that requires a lot of control and skill, and I'm definitely not the cleanest puff painter out there. But after many frustrating hours of painting out web lines, I was pretty happy with the end result. Now, about the mask, there are a couple of approaches you can do for it. The first is the lore-accurate way of straight fabric mask over the face, but the problem with that is, unless you've got some special skull-shaped genetics, it usually looks kind of goofy, especially from the side profile. Another way you can go about it is through using what's called a face shell.
basically a rigid mask that you wear over your face that goes under the fabric. Even the film actors use face shells for most shots for reasons like keeping consistent mask alignment, visual consistency with stunt doubles, and for the fact that it honestly just looks a lot better most of the time. I've gone both ways, and I honestly prefer using a 3D printed face shell, so I knew I was going to go that route for this. After learning a little bit of Blender and following the Patreon tutorials from the aforementioned GOAT, I managed to design my own face shell. I obsessed a little too much over the details. I wish I was kidding when saying that I spent literal hours over every single detail, like the curvature of the eye, or a literal millimeter difference of distance between the lenses. I went through a few prototype designs, and even though I thought I had it down, I printed it and even went as far as completely scrapping the entire thing because I personally thought the face shape looked a little off. Then I redesigned it and did all the post-processing again. The process of making the shell for me involves 3D printing it. I prefer using PETG when printing shells, and I use my new Bamboo Lab printer. Then I use a palm sander to smooth it out just a bit and paint it with truck bed liner to prevent the mask from sliding. Then I install N52 grade magnets for the eyes. Since it's going to be completely covered, the fine details aren't highly important, but that's a matter of personal preference. I honestly think I put way more work into it than I needed to, especially from the design aspect. I mean, I ran the first shell by some people and everyone said it looks good, it looks solid. That's what everyone said. Everyone except me. But in the end, one of those people, a close friend of mine, saw my revised face shell and was like, "I think this is one of my favorite Spider-Man mask designs ever." And it felt like all my nitpicking really paid off. That feeling of accomplishment right there is why I did it, but let me know what you guys think of the face shell design, which by the way, you can buy now. That's right, I'm selling the file for this shell on my new Etsy store. You guys can get this shell that I worked really hard on, and it would be a really big help to the channel too, allowing me to keep making cool stuff to show you guys. By the way, the $2 Patreon tier will be getting a discount code for all of my stuff on Etsy. Anyway, somewhat shameless advertising aside, let's talk about the lenses. Unlike the face shell printed on an FDM printer out of PETG, the frames are printed out of resin on an SLA printer. SLA printing is much more precise than FDM printing, which makes post-processing a lot easier and cleaner. After the print is finished, I wash the resin in a special solution, briefly soak the frames in water, dry them with an air gun, and cure it in a UV bath. Then I wet sand the prints with increasing grits up to 600, wearing a respirator because resin dust is really bad for your lungs. I use filler primer and then wet sand some more before finally painting them. Airbrushing was something I picked up just for this and will probably use more in the future since it's a lot cleaner than my typical spray paint, but the cleaner finish on the frames wasn't the reason I bought an airbrush. The real reason I needed an airbrush was the white lenses themselves. The lenses are made from steel mesh, which, despite its solid white appearance, is surprisingly easy to see through. Spray paint droplets are a lot larger than those from an airbrush and clog the mesh holes, making it so you can't see through them anymore, hence the need for an airbrush. After the mesh is complete, I form polycarbonate sheets to sandwich it between, secure the edges, and hit the inside with some anti-fog spray before wearing. With that, all the individual pieces of the main costume have been covered. Now all that's left is to put it all together. Which brings me to sewing. Now, I am not the most experienced seamster? Whatever it's called, but thanks to all the advice and tips I received, I managed to put it all together. I won't bore you with all the details of sewing every last seam, but it was quite challenging. I had to learn new skills like corner sewing and use creative methods with elastic to make the suit look as seamless as I could. Spandex is a bit of a pain to work with and took me some experimenting to get the settings on my sewing machine right. Some of the more challenging pieces included the boots and the back piece, where I carefully top-stitched the spider symbol as cleanly as possible. I made a lot of mistakes and had to undo a lot of stitches with a seam ripper. At one point I even thought I completely broke my sewing machine and spent 2 hours disassembling and analyzing it in a panicked manner before identifying 2 over-tightened screws that was causing the issue, and then put it back together. Anyways, my suit is sewn together mainly through zigzag and straight stretch stitches that will both stretch with my suit fabric. For the boots, I used the same scuba boots from my last suit and cleaned them up a bit. I also spent an absurd amount of time contemplating what I wanted the sole to look like, despite the fact that almost no one is ever going to pay attention to the bottom of my feet. I ended up making my own custom sole design pattern and engraving it on a rubber sheet. Then I used contact cement to attach it to the actual boot and glued down the edges for a cleaner appearance. And the final thing that gets added to the suit is the emblem.
I did this part more or less the same way as my last suit. I spent time designing my own symbol, and then I cut acrylic sheets matching that symbol on the laser cutter. Following that, I used a special adhesive that welds the sheets together to create a mold, which I then used to pour a 2-part polyurethane mix to create the final chest emblem. When the final emblem is done, I do need to stretch the fabric out before gluing it because the symbol won't stretch with the suit as much.
Sorry, Batman. I need to borrow your body.
Pause.
Alright, now, time to excessively obsess over the position of the emblem even though no one cares except me. Okay, what are we gonna call this guy? Put your name down for this character in the comments.
Now, in addition to the main suit, there's also a couple of things I added that I never got to do on my first one. The first addition is the web cartridge utility belt, which is modified from a pre-existing belt with a slim profile so that I can keep it as hidden as possible while wearing it. I sewed an extra layer of elastic to hold my web cartridges, and also printed out my spider signal logo on vinyl and placed it on. It looks a little tacky, but I think it helps complete it, honestly. Speaking of the spider signal, it's a bit on the sillier side of Spider-Man's history, but I kinda wanted one anyways. So I designed a signal that closely matched my mask pattern and had it ordered as a car door projector. It doesn't work super well from far away, but it can get pretty big and decently visible in total darkness. Another big addition to the suit is web wings. That's right, like I mentioned earlier, I'm bringing them back. My web wings have this sort of folding fan design so that they allow for more complete range of motion, but don't dangle down awkwardly when the arms are down. For this, I took this roll of PVC vinyl and then designed my own template for the folding design, which I then traced the web pattern on with hot glue. Then the web wings simply attached to the suit via magnets. But hey, speaking of Spider-Man suit accessories, haven't you guys noticed that there's a huge one that I haven't gone over yet? Not every version of Spider-Man has a utility belt or underarm webbing or even a suit comprised of separate pieces. But almost all versions of Spider-Man have this. In fact, if you're already a subscriber, it's probably the reason that you're subscribed to me. I am, of course, talking about Spidey's iconic web shooters. Yes, I've done it again, but I'm not going to spend too much time on them since I really didn't change much from my last web shooters. It's about as different from those as the Spider-Man 2 suit is from the Spider-Man 1 suit. So if you didn't see my last pair, go watch that video for a more in-depth view of it, and also to see the web fluid tutorial as well. But little update to that. Just ignore that whole bit about water. I was completely wrong about how that works, and it's pretty much useless in the way I present it there. Now, I'd like to point out that the water thing is definitely worth testing more. It appears to activate cross-linking in my formula. So, we have the ingredients for a much better web fluid here already. We just need to figure out how to activate them. I'll go through this briefly. There weren't any major design improvements, just things cleaned up and refined a little bit. I used the same panel design for laser cutting and polished them for a cleaner look. And like last time, the web cartridges are made from modified butane pencil torches that I finished on a lathe and then added basketball inflation valves to. I also slimmed down the main body because I removed the microcontroller and double tap function. It was just kind of a pain with the flimsy trigger I was using. To fix that, I just need to design a more fixed trigger built into the glove. Additionally, I was more thorough with post-processing these web shooter parts since I had more time and went through sanding, Bondo, paint, and a nice shiny graphite powder finish. Even though these web shooters are mostly the same as the last ones, they definitely seem to have worked a lot better this time around. I'm not sure what I did differently this time. Maybe it was the circuitry, maybe it was the web fluid, or maybe I just got lucky. But regardless, fun fact, these are the first pair of electric web shooters I've made that survived through the video and, as of recording this, still work. And now, with all that covered, I can finally suit up.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. It has been a lot of hard work, but it has also been a lot of fun to make. If you had fun watching, be sure to subscribe for all my future videos, and tell me what you think of my suit in the comments below. What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? Anything, really. And just a reminder that the 3D printing files for this shell are now available on my Etsy store, where I will be selling designs from now on. $2 Patreon members will be getting a discount, so be sure to check that out too. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.